what matters is not what one does, but the deeper motivation underlying that, why one does that, and who we become in that whole process. In crucial situations, the overall institutional objective supersedes everything. A true leader is someone who is able to build institutions.
What today is more critical for your success? Is it strategy or is it people?
I think clearly the culture and the people part supersedes. People carry only that legacy which they feel connected with. Authenticity is actually a partner to humility.
Hope is neither faith nor trust. Hope is just a pessimist which is disguised as an optimist.
The baby which is thrown into the air by the father, right? It's a faith that the father is going to definitely catch you, right?
Absolutely. So, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to you, depending on where you're joining us from. Welcome to this super relevant episode of Towards a Better World, my community on Thinkly, where I, Ayon Banerjee, speak to some of the most inspirational people from all walks of life and from all over the world. From decorated global CEOs to child prodigies, social change makers to even the occasional Bollywood celebrity. In our present season, we are doing a deep dive into the subject of maximization of human potential. And higher education is definitely one of the key building blocks for the same. In the language of social sciences, there are two kinds of effects of judging human performance inside an institution. The first is known as treatment effect, something like getting people into a commando training program. The assumption here is that when the candidates are made to go through this rigor and the grind, irrespective of their individual strengths or weaknesses, they would automatically emerge as toughened soldiers on the other side. The other is known as selection effect, something that is applicable for modeling agencies. In other words, you do not acquire good looks because you get into a modeling agency, but rather you get into a modeling agency because you already possess good looks. So now this has been a raging debate in recent years, that is whether top tier institutions offer you an experience of a treatment effect or do they default into selection effect. Having worked closely with professionals from some of the top universities in the world and also with regular folks like myself, I have concluded that despite all this cynicism, your alma mater does matter. Getting into a top institute gives you an edge over others who didn't make it through. Secondly, when you get into a group that accounts for the top 1 or 2% of the academic brains in the country, you're automatically part of a combined inertia of your peer group. And even if you yourself are an average performer, you are still way above the mean for your contemporaries outside the university walls. Thirdly, and most importantly, of course, when you are going to a good institute, it gives you the right alum network to be a part of, something that will consistently support you as you grow in your careers. Because the folks you share your dorm with for these 4 to 5 years, these people will go ahead and lead entire organizations in future, sometimes even governments and countries. And lastly, of course, it always helps to be part of a pride group because you have less possibilities to lose your way because there'll always be ample checks and balances to keep you on track in these good institutes. So, in this context, I thought of inviting someone who's not merely studied at the two top institutes of India, IIT Madras and IIM Bangalore, but who has, after a very high profile career in corporate for almost 2 decades now, has returned to his own alma mater as a CEO, someone who is helping shape future careers of some of the brightest minds in India. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let me invite my ex colleague and my very dear friend, Kaviraj Nair, to Towards a Better World. Welcome, Kaviraj.
Thank you, Ayon. It's an absolute pleasure for me to be on this show. And good afternoon and good evening to all the audience, depending on whichever time zone that they are in. As I said, I really find it a privilege for me to be a part of this discussion in a community that really values purpose, reflection, and betterment. And it's also very deeply personal for me because I have actually transitioned in a way from a corporate career to academia, and with a lot of questions, which I confronted at that point in time. And I've realized how impact, meaning, legacy, all these things matter a lot as one progresses in one's career. In fact, what matters is not what one does, but the deeper motivation underlying that, why one does that, and who we become in that whole process, right? So I hope to share some of those thought processes during this conversation and also to discuss with you some of the questions that still continue to shape my thought process. I look forward eagerly to this conversation.
Absolutely, and so well said, Kaviraj, as always. Thank you very much, and we thank you for taking time out, especially because it's a public holiday today at Chennai, where you are based. So, and you came down to office to do this for us. So, we are really very grateful to you for this. So, before I go into the questions, this is for the audience. So, we will have a Q&A session at the end of this episode. So, feel free to drop your questions on the app, and we'll be trying to read out and answer all the questions. So don't wait. If you have any questions, just type it out. So Kaviraj, now, let me dive into it by straight away talking about one of our favorite talking points, which is, as you mentioned rightly, purpose and potential. I mean, how does someone like you distinguish between personal success and organizational success? And how has your definition of success evolved from the corporate boardrooms when I used to know you to academic corridors where you are today? Kaviraj.
Thank you, Ayon. Thank you so much for that wonderful question. As you know, we would have spent several hours during our career together, discussing some of these aspects. So it's a pleasure to kind of look at some of these aspects. As you mentioned, individual success is something that is very, very personal to a particular a professional. It is something that can be measured using metrics like titles, promotions, financial success, and things like that, right? It is about personal gratification at one level. And I'm sure there is absolutely nothing wrong in that, because all of us go through phases in our career where individual success is important, where giving back to the society becomes important, where an institutional leadership becomes important, and all of that. Whereas an institutional success is way beyond that, right? It is something about setting things in place which outlive your own tenure in that organization, right? It is about putting systems in place which will be enablers for success for other people. So you move on from being a star to being a part of the soil where seeds of success of other people can be sown, right? And I would actually think that, and I mean, some of us are lucky enough to, everyone has to go through this cycle in one's career where one has to experience all these emotions, right? At some level, nurturing becomes far more important. Setting systems in place becomes far more important. And talking of something like IIT Madras in the current context itself, I think that's where I have seen a lot of institutional success, because the brand IIT Madras itself has been built over years, right? By the relentless perseverance and the contributions of our alumni, our faculty members, our students. The whole ecosystem has really built in. So when you talk about, and in an institutional success, the purpose supersedes your individual ego and your individual success and other things. Of course, individual success is very important. That has contributed in the overall scheme of things to the larger institutional success. It's individuals ultimately who build up this whole institution. But in crucial situations, the overall institutional objective supersedes everything. And that is how I would actually see the difference between the personal success and individual success. And individual success, I mean, personal individual success and the institutional success. And I would any day think that a true leader is someone who is able to build institutions and not just have a bunch of followers following his own accolades alone.
Very, very well said, Kaviraj. And I personally know this because like you said, we have had long conversations on this, and that was when both of us were much younger, and you are a few years younger to me. So, and you were really very young at that time. But I was really very impressed with the way, and you always had this thing in you, which was to go some beyond your own career. I still remember, you used to talk a lot about meaning, about contribution, what can we leave behind us, and like you said, which outlives one's own tenure at a job. When you create and construct an edifice which stays even after you are gone from there. I think that's a great thing, and you have really walked the talk, Kaviraj, and I am so happy to see this, that where you are today, and you are really contributing. Because for the folks who probably don't know Kaviraj personally, I can tell you, I mean, he's one of the most humblest human beings possible. He'll never talk about himself, but I know he, as I said, from IIT IIM, and then he's a TAS graduate, so Tata Administrative Services, which like which recruits the cream de la cream of India. And he's been there for 9 odd years, I think, before you went to GE. And again in GE, where Kaviraj and I were together, Kaviraj also, got into the most prestigious rotational program for senior managers in the world at that time, where we were colleagues at the ECLP program. And then, of course, he went to organizations like PepsiCo, like Star Network, and then he was in software for some time, and then of course at his current role. So we will unpack more about more of your wisdom, Kavi, as we move ahead. So
Well, no, thank you. In fact, I must say this, Ayon, I think you have been extremely generous and kind and benevolent with your words. And I have truly enjoyed the conversations where this is another thing, right? I mean, leaders like you have always spent time, found time in spite of your, I mean, extremely hectic sales schedule. I know how busy a salesman in a sales leader in an organization like GE can be. But in spite of that, people like you, leaders like you, used to find time to discuss various concepts with us, or like have brainstorming sessions and all of that. That's truly a hallmark of a leader, and I have learned a lot from you. And from the way you talk to your colleagues, and as once when I joined GE, how you helped me integrate with the system. I think that has been truly an eye opener for me.
Always kind, Kavi. I don't know if I deserve it, but thank you. Thank you. And this kind of it's very inspiring when I hear you speak, Kavi. And now one thing that's always stood out about you, about you for me, since we know each other, and it's been like 15 years now, like I said, is your amazing people skills and your networking prowess. Something that seems innate in you. I mean, given that you now play a key role in shaping the institutional legacy of an iconic institution like IIT Madras. And you said, like, it has a legacy that has been built over decades. What today is more critical for your success? Is it strategy or is it people? And if it is both, how do you walk the fine balance between strategy and people?
Absolutely. I think unequivocally, I can say that it is people. That has been, I mean, as you know, this is like an age old debate on whether strategy eats culture for breakfast, or like whichever culture eats strategy for breakfast, or whichever way it is, right? Like, I mean, but I think in my view, I think clearly the culture and the people part supersedes. Because if you do a strategy without people is very inert, right? Of course, people without focus or strategy, it just becomes a comfort zone, or like a retreat, or any of those things. So you really need to have both. But having said that, legacy is an area where both these meet, right? And please, and we all know that, like, it is very important to, if you look at any theories on leadership, the adaptive leadership theory, or any of those things, they are not talking about much about didactic way of strategy alone. It's about connecting with people, conquering hearts and conquering minds, and all of those things, right? And when you look at a legacy, please know that, I mean, we all know that people carry only that legacy which they feel connected with. And only if people carry a legacy, it becomes a legacy, right? I mean, you could have the best of strategy, but if you're not able to convince the people to take that forward, the moment you move out of the hall, that just dies, right? So I think as carriers of your, and every strategy, a successful strategy always leads to something of a legacy. Building institutions, as you mentioned, edifices of success, or any of those things, and that happens when there are people willing to carry it forward, and people will carry it forward only when they feel connected with it. So, and I think it's extremely important to look at the people aspect of it, get them convinced, get them on board, and take it forward. So that would be my view on it, actually.
Perfect. Yeah, I think, of course, you are, and like I said in the question itself, for me, you were always, we all of us are good at either of the two. Some of us are good at task skills. Some of us are good at people skills. So the former, begin with the task in mind, and then they go to the people to get it done. And then people like you and me, we are probably people skills people. We start with the people, and then we somehow get the task done through the people. Because like you rightly said, and I've always found you like that, and you are amazing at that. even when we used to work in G, I was like astounded at your network. I mean, the sheer number of people and the diverse kind of people you knew, it was really amazing and very inspiring. So I'm
But
sure that.
I've learned a lot of things from you in this regard, Ayon, because while you were like a hardcore, relentless sales leader chasing numbers on one side, you are also like this, the poet, the successful. I mean, I'm in awe of all the articles and the poetry that you have written. We used to discuss a lot of poetry, right? And a successful author of multiple books you have, like on one side, like so. You are this unique and rare combination of a leader whom I have found, right? Like I mean, on one side, totally driving the team and the business and the focus, and then in the evening we could go to a dinner and discuss, things which are
Jack Gilbert.
completely not related to uh, engines. I mean, the steam turbines or any of that. Like, but more on
Absolutely.
the more on the socio-political and the poetry side. I think it's very important, as you rightly said. Maybe that is actually what made you also extremely successful as a salesman, because it's as a sales leader you were able to reach out to people, right? Like I mean, so clearly.
Thank you. Thank you. And I really miss those evenings, like you said, where we would discuss not steam turbines and gas turbines, but Jack Gilbert and Tony Hoagland and
Correct, absolutely.
Charles Bukowski. And, those were the days, really.
Correct.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Now, this, nicely segues into my next question, Kaviraj, which is, the power of collaboration and trust. Given that your current role, involves working with some of the top talent in corporations, alumni, researchers, the works. Uh, how do you manage to seamlessly collaborate to get to a unified purpose by navigating through multiple egos? And I know that ego is a bad word, but it's also a necessary evil. I mean, it will exist everywhere. So how do you navigate through the multiple egos and yet you get your work done, Kaviraj?
No, absolutely. And I think one should be very cognizant of the fact that a person is a leader or a successful leader because he or she has a certain amount of ego and self-respect and a sense of identity and all of that. That is desirable to some extent, right? It's like good cholesterol, bad cholesterol, or whatever you say, right? I mean, to a minimum extent, it's definitely required. But there are, and how do you actually work with them? So to be very honest, in the current role, for example, whenever I interact with super successful alumni, all of them have reached a certain level of success, professional success, because they are good, extremely good at what they're doing. So it's very important for me to go from a position of humble inquiry, right, as they call it, right, and rather than posture myself as an expert, which I'm not in many of the areas, right? I mean, it may actually mean, showing the vulnerabilities of the professional. And vulnerability here, I would say, is a very positive word in a way. It
Yes.
is about showing up when you don't know what the outcome is. It's about trusting the other person, to show the real self of you. So I will actually, I never go or as a gardener or as somebody who knows everything about everyone. I would rather I will attend all these meetings with a sense of inquiry, and my first thing will be to say that, listen, I don't have answers to all these questions, right? I mean, but together I am sure that during this conversation we can build answers and we can find solutions to some of the things, right? You are more a co-traveler, and helping them build. Helping first, you have to understand what are their dreams, desires, anxieties, pain points, all of that they have been experiencing throughout their career, in a way, right? So especially in my role, I am looking at ways in which we could collaborate with them in helping build social impact, in helping leave a lasting legacy, right? In helping them find meaning in socially relevant purposes, right? So all this will require me to have a deeper understanding of their career journey, what they have achieved, what is the material success that they have done, what are their other areas of hobbies and philanthropic pursuits and all of that. So I always, kind of approach it from a position of humble inquiry, trying to understand more. And so the question is never like, can you do this for us? The question is about, in this partnership, what does success look for you? What is the meaning that you are trying to find, right? So let's start from that, and how could we collaborate and how could we enable you to achieve or the next fulfillment in your career. So I think once we go from that position of collaboration and a position of inquiry and humble inquiries, right, I think it becomes much easier to deal with people. And of course, as I mentioned, there are completely different stakeholders in my current role that I deal with. One is faculty and academia. Second is alumni, and third, of course, is my internal employees and the teammates and all of them. And then, of course, as part of, since we also deal with CSR funding from various corporates, so CXOs and corporate leaders and board members and all of them. And each one is in his or her respective position and vantage point because they have certain unique traits, right? There is absolutely no point in trying to teach a fish to swim and vice versa, right? Like, so you kind of try to accept them for who they are and try to understand their point of view and try and see how we can bring all of that together on the table and find a point of convergence. And the good thing is that all of them, in the point that we said before, like, most of them have been institutional leaders, so they allow the purpose to supersede their individual aspirations when it comes to crucial junctures, right? So that has really been, and in some cases I also put an extra effort to kind of bring that that element into the discussion, right? So that is something that has really helped me navigate some of these conundrums as I move forward.
So I know, your alumni network is very strong, and I often see you, at different events all across the world. I think you were in Silicon Valley some time
Yeah,
back, and then
correct.
I keep seeing pictures that you are at different alumni meets. So what you mentioned also CSR initiatives, and one part is, this is a supplementary question to the previous one. So one part is, of course, getting to your IIT Madras alumni and getting them involved in your current activities. I'm sure there is less resistance there, and because they are doing it for their own alma mater. But how about organizational leaders who are not part of IIT Madras or IIT in general? I mean, how do you navigate through those leaders when you work with them on a day in day out basis? Is there any difference, or are they the same?
No, so at some level, okay, there is always an emotional attachment that alumni will have to the institute, right? So that is the first conversation is always easy, right? But most of these alumni, so there are reasons. It also then leads us to why do alumni and the corporate leaders give back to the institute, right? Of course, many of the alumni also give back because they feel emotionally connected. Most of them say that they are what they are because of what they learned from IIT, and they have this sense of obligation. And many of them have been recipients of, say, for example, merit scholarships. They feel eternally obliged to some of the faculty members who went out of the way to kind of help them clarify their doubts and give them conceptual clarity and introduce them to the professional networks and made the whole career for them, right? Like, so there is a deep sense of obligation, and it's also forward paying forward for them, like, right? So that is one aspect. Second aspect is that what we have been always talking now is that now the kind of work that IIT, for example, is doing, the research and the cutting edge research and the new horizons that we are exploring and all of that, it need not just be confined to a way of giving back and gratitude and that alone. It could be a very meaningful way of building your future part of the career by being part of some of the research centers of excellence and other things that we have here, right? And so the second reason, and the more important reason, I would believe, is the impact that we create. I think so. The discussions have always been about what is the impact that this will have, right? When you contribute money to a scholarship program, like, or a student distress fund, for example, that is really transforming the lives of otherwise meritorious students, but who are at a financial disadvantage and hence not able to smoothly navigate the system. And that sense of gravitation when they see this handwritten letters or the voice messages, or sometimes they interact in person to the students with the students whom they are mentoring, that gratification is unbelievable, right? Like, I remember, like, one of the topmost Indo-American business leaders in Silicon Valley, right? He told me that he is interested in seeing some of these handwritten letters, but he did not want to meet them in person to avoid any kind of feeling of obligation from either side. He said, but I wanted to know how they are progressing, because at some point in time, that has been my story too. Like, I have lived this life on the other side before I actually came to this place and made by is one of the best leaders globally. I mean, all right. So he was telling that. So there are people like that who get gratification and also the impact. So, I will actually, this is again, every time we go into meeting up with a person to discuss a project, the focus is always on impact, right? And as you know, you would have you would obviously know Viktor Frankl's The Man's Search for Meaning. As long as one is convinced of the why, one will go any extent to suffer the how or what part of it, right? That doesn't really matter as long as you are convinced of the why part. And it is meaning that it is not, frankly, power or pleasure that is really enduring or that is really the driver of human action, but it is meaning. Once you get to the depths of that whole thing, right? So we try and talk about the impact research will have. So that is the second part of it. For example, we say that you can do direct service charity by buying ultrasounds or any of those things, but you could also invest the money in bringing down the cost of the ultrasound to one half or one third or something like that, which will have a better impact on the community, right, in the long term. And that is really translational, right? And so there are two or three types of impact. One is the direct service that we do by feeding the people. Second is actually putting systems in place that we just spoke about, institutional leadership and other things, right? Where we build maybe put a system in place where through which some of these things are done. And the third and the highest one is actually which also we are able to do because of our the institution that we are, is changing the whole policy network itself. So how do we change the way we look at food security itself, right? And because of the unique position that the institute is in, many of our faculty members are able to actually deal with the government and governments at that level and help build policy, help make policy changes, right? So I think this is this is very important, right? The this is also related to in some way the double loop learning and all those concepts. Single loop learning is where you actually try and look at the problem, find the quick fixes to that problem, and then solve it. Double loop learning is you actually start questioning the underlying assumptions and why this is happening and is it actually needed to change, right? So somewhere these are different ways in which one could look at these things. So essentially coming back to this point, so one is of course giving back, second is impact, third part is we are also very transparent, ensure that relationship is very transparent in that way. It's a CAG audited organization for that matter. Even otherwise, everything is very transparent and very straightforward. So every action we take, we make sure that we co-opt the other person into our system and he or she knows why every action is done in a partnership. I think so these are the ways in which we kind of work with both the corporate leaders as well as senior alumni leaders. And I think at that level, all of them have similar questions and similar motives, right? Like impact, is it transparent, is it all of that? So I think we address all of those areas.
Very well said. And I think, yeah, at that level, I think it all gets a lot similar. And we've been, I have been fortunate to have worked with some of the IIT leaders at GE. So some of them are pretty illustrious names in the industry now. Ashish was on my podcast some months back.
I
Ashish
see.
Bhandari,
Okay.
who is the MD and CEO for Thermax.
Of course. Yeah.
And Ashish, I remember, had written a post after getting his son admitted in the US about his own IIT Delhi days. IIT Bombay or Delhi, I think.
Bombay.
Ashish,
Yeah.
Bombay. So Ashish had mentioned that post went viral. Actually, he said that he said
I
something
remember
similar
that
to what
post. Yeah.
you that about IO, and only the fan didn't work, except but apart from that, I owe everything else to IIT or something like that. And then we knew Prat Kumar. I don't know if you remember Prat.
Yeah.
Pratt was a scholarship student from IIT Delhi who went to US, and then he was Boeing. He was a F-15 program leader of Boeing, and big man. So IITs
Absolutely.
really are the factory of talent from India, the best talent from India. So now you and I have had long, and you kind of touched upon it on your last answer a little bit. So you and I, Kaviraj, had long conversations on human values, right? And why, as leaders, each of us needs to stand for something lest we fall for anything. And this was still when you were wearing a corporate hat but in your new life now, uh, which has, I'm sure you also have stretched deliverables at your new role as the CEO of Institutional Advancement at IIT Madras. So how do you strike the balance between scale and soul, that is numbers versus mission?
Absolutely. Thank you, Ayon, for asking that really insightful question. I think it's something that I really wanted to speak about because, haven't we seen organizations, I mean, billion-dollar organizations vanish overnight? Haven't we also seen organizations which perhaps haven't had such aggressive growth rates, but have, lived for hundreds of years or lasted for hundreds of years, right? And therein lies the answer. Clearly, the values of the soul or the narrative, right? I think that becomes, unless you have the narrative right, unless people know why they exist, it all goes back to the purpose part of it, right? Unless they know why they exist, and unless they are able to replicate the soul into every scaling part of that they do. Scale, of course, is very seductive. And just to look at margins or take up deals which perhaps don't go with the cultural and value DNA of an organization, right? All those things are very easy to happen. But then it's also likely that most of the organizations actually, unfortunately, disappear in shorter period of time. But
Right.
I have been fortunate enough to work with organizations, where value systems mattered the most. Wherein I started my career, for example, the Tata Group. Clearly, Tata Group is one place where all the Tata chairmen, they have actually considered it. Was to such an extent that we all know that Tata still used to say that we also make steel, right? I mean, it was such a people-centric organization. It is still such a people-centric organization, which explains why it has been able to successfully live in a like that for several centuries. I mean, several hundreds. I mean, several years right now, right? So I think, and I will also take an analogy. It is, in my view, it is like, for example, like the fractal geometry, right? Like, I mean, the same symbol, the same pattern gets expanded in a fractal, right? That is how there's such beautiful fractal patterns that you see. But if you actually look at every one of that, it is the same pattern that gets really expanded, right? Or if you look at human biology, for example, the DNA, right? It's the same DNA that really gets replicated, right? It is the same DNA and the value system, and that is what success is. The moment, of course, there are mutations that happen over a period of time, like in any organization. But the moment you lose that DNA in a cancerous way, the organism actually dies, right? So I would actually think that, so this fractal analogy is something that has really stuck in my mind for a long time. Those beautiful floral patterns that you see, which then gets expanded. And that is clearly how I will see expansion, organizational expansions, right? Everything that you do, like starting from board level decisions to what happens in a team discussion of with 2 or 3 team members, everything, the value system has to be very clear, right? What we stand for, the way, what is the purpose of our existence. That also help us weed out a lot of choices that are seemingly, where things which look like choices to us, it's easy for us to move away from some of them, and it helps us focus. And such focus, expansion, and growth is far more sustainable and enduring than overnight expansion without really having a soul, or the true value system.
Very true, very true. And values are, where they all begin and end, I think, and that's where there's been a rapid erosion of values in many organizations, like you said, and they don't last, they don't stand the test of time. And you've been into such organizations, Tata Group you mentioned. Incidentally, Deepesh Nanda was here, our
Absolutely.
old friend. So Deepesh is now a big man in Tata. He is the president and
Absolutely. I've
CEO
been following
of
his LinkedIn
Tata
profiles too. Yeah, yeah.
Renewables. Yeah. So Dipesh was on my podcast last year. So Dipesh was mentioning about the Tata Group. So I was asking him the same thing, that one of the most respected global multinationals like GE, and on the other end of the spectrum is one of the most respected Indian multinationals like Tata, but so similar in terms of values. Both of them very much integrity driven, people centric,
Absolutely.
and all those things. And which you said very rightly, that I love that bit of your answer. Of course, the fractal patterns is very, very great, well said. And the second part I loved is, when values are there, it automatically clears away the surround noise, of options which look like options or something like that you said, and but which you don't want to take anyway, because you're very sorted in terms of your values, what you stand for. And I think that's what great organizations are. And they stand for something and they stick to that, and that's why they are hundreds of years old. uh,
No, no, absolutely. And I think even in the current world, I mean, all of us are bombarded with choices. I think the biggest problem that most of us face is that the plethora of choices that we have every day, right? I mean, there are, and all of them appeal to us, all of them look good. Like, so then what do you choose? I think in our daily life, and then you extend that with an organizational level also, right? And I think it's very, very important. If you ask me what is one of the single biggest problem that our generation of people at this level, right, faces, that there are too many choices also around, right? And it is very important to have a clear value system and a clear understanding of what is it that you want to do with your life, right? And that really helps. And I think that is similar analogy at an organizational level also is applicable.
Perfect. Yes, yes. Like you said, you must have read Barry Schwartz's Paradox of Choice, where,
Absolutely.
when you have too many choices, you go into a decision fatigue. But when you are value driven with a few choices to make, it's life is easy. I think great, very well answered, Kaviraj. Thank you very much. So now, as I mentioned in my opening introduction, that remarks, that you are by far one of the most talented academic minds I have known in my career, and yet you're probably one of the most humble souls that I've seen. While humility is definitely your inherent value system that you live by, I know that. I would like to hear your views about humility being a key tribute for leaders in today's self-aggrandizing world that we live in. It's full of these control freak and chest thumping leaders all around us that we see. And this is a two-part question. So that was the first part. The second part is authenticity. That is, in this age of photo ops, how does one retain authenticity and authentic humility? Not just that social media version of fake humility, which is just visible on a smartphone, but which is not practiced in real life, versus the real kind of humility, Kaviraj.
Thank you, Ayon. I think again you're being very kind with your words, and thank you so much for that. And I would also say that, like, see, humility, frankly, if you look at it, more than a virtue, it's actually a strategic imperative today. In a world where it's obvious that no single leader has got answers to all problems, right? I mean, no single person knows answers to a lot of questions, right? So it is for your own strategic benefit, it is for your own perspective of moving forward, that you become humble. That gives you a position from where you can absorb a lot more things. That creates that room for new thoughts, new ideas, and new concepts to come in, right? So whenever I am speaking with a person who is 20 years junior to me, who has just joined, it is in my own selfish interest to be humble and learn a few things from that person who has just joined in, because it's I mean, the new generation has a far better understanding and grasp on a lot of things that any of us have. I'm sure that your children teach you more. I mean, daughter teaches you many of the things. Same here, like, my children teach me a lot more things, right? And so it is always important to be, again, I'll go back to what I mentioned earlier, that humble inquiry, right? Like, that becomes very important. That's really not a soft trait, or that's not a weakness anymore. That is really the strategy. That's a strategic imperative for each individual to become successful, to be humble, right? And to learn new things. That creates a room for you to absorb new things. That's one. And I will also say that authenticity is actually a partner to humility.
Sure.
And what is authenticity is, like, I mean, you obviously don't want to live two lives, right? What one you are externally and what you are internally, especially in today's world. That's going to create significant fatigue, and you will burn out
Yes.
as an individual if you do that, right? And it is very important to actually be honest, to create a learning environment, and that humility, or honesty and humility, to to be your authentic self and learn new things. And that really helps, is what I feel.
Very well said. And I love that bit when you said that, when it's a strategy, it's a strategic advantage when you're humble, because you get to learn more, and you from the present generation, or even from your own generation. Yeah, only when we are humble do we listen with all our senses. But at the same time, I asked you that authenticity question for a reason, Kaviraj, because sometimes, like you said, that there is a fatigue these days, because humility has started becoming a contest these days. People are that fake humility. People will touch someone's feet in public, and then they put up the post on social media, and people will rant about how humble they are. But that I and all this oversell of humility, and Indians consider humility to be a very big virtue, but an oversell of humility has led to marginalization of Indians in the global scene quite a bit. I've seen, because they always imagine Indians to be, those slum dogs hanging from train tops. So, they are passed over for important roles because our humility sometimes becomes a hindrance in our, in our showing our real strength. So be humble, but also be authentic about your humility.
No, absolutely. And honestly, if you ask me for a personal choice between humility and authenticity, I will actually go for authenticity because
Correct.
people love you and trust you for your authentic self than necessarily for your perfect self, right? So
Correct.
if you're compromising authenticity to to show that perfectly humble all of that self, it's definitely not worth it, right? So humility is extremely important, but between humility and authenticity, my choice goes for always goes for authenticity. Like I would rather know a known devil than an unknown angel, right? Authenticity is very important.
Thank you, Kaviraj, and I think we are on the same page about that. So
Absolutely,
now,
as always.
so
On most
let's
of the
now talk about,
topics, yeah.
of course. No, let's now talk about building a future because we've had conversations on this. And I remember, and I had actually noted it down during one of our conversations. You had said a very interesting line, that the job of a leader of an academic institution is to balance heritage with innovation. And actually, the exact phrase that you used was very interesting. You said, institutions are responsible for walking the right balance between being repositories of memory with being laboratories of invention. Wow. How do you do it? Now tell us that.
No, I remember that conversation. I think I had read it somewhere at that point in time. Yeah, clearly, I think, see, again, I have an analogy of, I mean, it's a simple analogy, right? Like, I mean, like a tree which has deep rooted traditions, or like, an organization like a tree which has deep roots. Now, it's possible for us to actually look at the root alone, right? But it is also important for us to look at any new blooms that may come up on the tree, right? And this, it's very important to have a deep rooted tradition, but to have a legacy, just preserving the tradition alone will not help. You have to enable the future. Then only the continuity and the legacy will happen, right? I will look at tradition or the heritage more as a compass and not as a cage, not as a prison, right? You have to grow from that. So in fact, I think there is a term called presencing in that U theory. Like, what it says is that how do you look towards the future? How do you envision sensing the future while being deeply grounded in the present? It's called presencing, right? So
Wow.
that term has again stuck with me. So I have always tried to look at, while it is important for me to look at, even if you look at, for example, IIT Madras, right? It has a heritage that it has built up over the last several years, right? But it's also equally important for the institute to be agile, to look at new opportunities. For example, we just started recently a school of data science and AI, a department of data science and AI. We have, keeping in pace with the times, we have now a department of medical science and technology, which combines the data science and AI with the medical sciences, looking at, creation of AI based diagnostic tools, or like medical devices manufacturing and all of that, because a lot of those things are, most of those things are imported as far as India is considered. We also have a school of sustainability, right? And we are also envisaging this, and we also see that like most of the things going forward is going to be interdisciplinary. And if we had chosen to remain just purists, just focusing only on fundamental research and not application research, perhaps we will fall out of sync with the changing times, right?
Right.
And there is a finite threat, a risk that we might become irrelevant at some point in time, right? So while it is important to focus on the fundamental research and standing on the shoulders of those giants who walked before us and who contributed to the success of the institute, it's also equally important for us to keep this radar, to see those new blooms which are coming up on the tree, right? And adapt ourselves and change. So I would certainly think that, as I mentioned, it is a compass for moving forward, and embedded in this tradition and in that heritage is again the values and the purpose and all of those things, right? But it's equally important to enable the future by looking at the innovation part of it. We now, for example, we have a Center for Innovation here in IIT, which is about nurturing startups. Several successful startups have come out of it. Many of those, like, startups are really hardcore technology ones, like, the Mastro one or the Hyperloop one, which looks at the magnetic levitation and other things. Like a lot of those things, like be it driverless cars or solar powered vehicles or EV related work or any of those things. So it is important for us, and we also believe that if we are truly, and we have truly redefined the way, I would say, an academic institute interacts with industry.
Yes.
It could be through co-creation, looking at the problem statements and working with them in applied research areas, or how we get funded through some of these industry areas, right? Like, so there is a lot more of remodeling or refactoring that have happened, right? And so this is all, I would say, has happened because one was agile, one was flexible, one was open-minded, one was very keen to get outside in perspective, right? So all through this time, one has kept the basic tenets of the institutions intact. That is, focus on merit, absolute focus on merit, absolute transparency, very rigorous way of measurement and metrics, right? Complete freedom being given to the professors and the faculty members, their independence with absolutely no interference on that, right? So these are some of the tenets which we believe are very crucial to the success of a university. The measurement system, the independence that is given to the faculty members, the complete focus, 100% focus on merit and all of those things. So while those things are kept as basic tenets, we have been able to look towards the future and make a lot more of changes in the system.
Fantastic. Yeah, I know. And IIT Madras in recent years, you've been always in the news for some of the coolest startups. And I was just reading the other day about this transport system which will take from Calcutta to Chennai in 3 hours or something, which is
That's a hyperloop one, which I was just mentioning about.
Hyperloop. Yeah, so amazing. I mean, and because there's been a raging debate these days that whether Indian startups are not creating cool technology. We are just
I know.
service providers. You know the recent remark by our honorable minister, which sparked a lot of debate. But I think IIT Madras is definitely not among those, because you guys are really doing a lot of stuff in technology.
Hopefully. And I also want to say, for example, now the number of electives, we have about 40% electives in undergraduate program right now, which is very different from what it was when we were studying, right? So you could very well be a civil engineer with a minor focus on robotics, and chemical engineering engineer with data science and other things. We also introduced a lot of interdisciplinary dual degree programs where you could do like a 5-year program with a minor, a formal minor in one of the other areas. Okay, that also gives us flexibility to retain some of our best undergraduate students to do masters within the institute also. So this is all part of, there is a lot of strategy without compromising on the basic tenets.
Fantastic. No, great answer, Kaviraj. Thank you. So you mentioned sustainability in your part of your answer. So is sustainability in institutions, yeah, when you say sustainability, is it more about financial endowments? And I know financial endowments are very important in Ivy League or tier one universities and institutes like IITs. And or is it cultural continuity? I mean, what have you learned in your current assignment? What truly endures and stands the test of time, whether is it financial endowments alone, or it is cultural continuity, or is it a
I,
balance of both?
I I would definitely think, see, financial endowment is absolutely important, but cultural continuity is even more important, right? Culture is what remains in the room when the leader walks out of the room, right? I mean,
Wow.
and many of us actually, the leaders make their entry and they also make their exits, right? But it
Correct.
is a culture that really is the continuity factor, and it has to be
Yes.
additive, accretive, right? I mean, everyone adds to that culture. Of course, it's important. I mean, this is not to say, see, none of this is like a completely extreme replies, like totally no to the endowment part and only culture and vice versa or any of that, right? But if you ask me, absolutely both are important. It is important to build a lasting endowment, which is the very purpose of my office itself. As you mentioned, all the Ivy League schools have got very large endowments, and Indian universities are just taking their baby steps in that direction, but nonetheless, we are moving forward. But a more preponderant thing is to have a very strong culture, a structure, a culture on merit, a culture on transparency, and all of those things. And that is what is really going to transmit. And we also just spoke about this before when we spoke about the organizations which last centuries. It's clearly the culture path, backed by a solid endowment. And the good thing is that if you have a good culture and a good focus and all of that, it's easy to expand some of those programs, that the growth becomes much, it becomes actually a movement, right? And
Absolutely.
then attracting the funding becomes, and the endowment becomes much easier, I would say.
Very well said. And I think, for the viewers, IIT Madras has been getting some record endowments in the past few years, right, Kaviraj? So I think that speaks for it. So, and that,
I think
we,
thanks to all our generous donors and alumni and corporate donors who have been very kind and benevolent. And thank you to the faculty-driven ecosystem of IIT Madras, the director, the deans, and all of them who have really collaborated together. The students, everyone who have collaborated together to make that happen.
great, great. And I'm sure, they it has the institute has also benefited from a leader of your leadership,
I
from
think
your
my
leadership.
team, the team I have, I'm blessed with a fantastic team who, I mean, who are again driven by outcomes, right? I mean, so we are a fairly flexible team that way in terms of the work hours and other things. There are days when they are driven by mission that they work continuously, but there are also days when people take it easily. But essentially, a mission-driven team, which has really stood by us, like which really goes. So the slogan inside the office itself is walk that extra mile, to see that extra smile on the face of it could be a student or a faculty or any of them, right? So I think the team is really driven. The team goes that extra mile to deliver. So I think that has really helped.
Let me get to we are probably reaching the end of my questions. So let me ask you a personal question. So this is a supplementary question on collaboration, and your job definitely calls for a lot of it, and you just mentioned that. Has collaboration with others helped you understand yourself better? I mean, what have your partnerships, with corporates, alumni, and change makers, have they revealed to you anything about your own inherent motivations, Kaviraj?
Oh, every second, if I must say, right? Because the best part of the job right now is the opportunity to interact with people from completely diverse set of backgrounds, right? Like, I mean, we have alumni who have gone on to become excellent professors in some of the topmost universities in the US, who have gone on to industry, who have taken spiritual line and have become monks, right? And who have taken to music. Prasanna, for example, is a maestro in guitar, like, and doing several concerts. And we have several classical singers who amongst our alumni, right? And same with corporates also. So while talking to each of them, and each of them, as you mentioned, they are in that position because of their unique traits. So it's pointless to try and bring a homogeneity among those people, right? Their traits and all of that. So I also have to adapt myself, and that kind of helps me understand, unravel my own blind spots, and the deeper motivations in what I do, why I do all of those. So there is always reflective moments for introspection, right? Which I do. And I travel quite a bit, as you mentioned. And so this travel also gives me an opportunity to kind of step back, get on the balcony, and like kind of, introspect about a lot of these things. So, and it's a clear mirror. And I would say that though I have worked in corporates in various roles in the past, this has helped me stretch my interpersonal skills on one side and mold myself in ways that I never envisaged I would. Right. So clearly, this collaboration with these corporate partners have really helped me grow as an individual at a personal and at a professional level.
Fantastic. And this is my comment, I mean, from your answer, Kaviraj. And I think, now that I'm hearing you speak after quite a long time about your job, I think, this was a role made in heaven for you, because, I always felt that, you are such a brilliant academic mind who had gone to IIT and IIM. But at the same time, whenever we used to talk, I used to be quite very impressed with the breadth of your interests. You were not somebody who was restricted either to technology or to corporate management. You were someone who had diverse interests, like in spirituality, whether it was poetry, it was music, and we used to have long conversations on that. And I think, all that kind of surround sound in in your psyche is probably coming and adding up to your current role, and that's why you are doing so well, Kaviraj.
No, thank you. And I think, as I said, you are, I think, I don't deserve any of what you said. I think you're being too generous and benevolent with your words. But I must say that I have learned a lot from you, and especially the way you have with your words, the written word. I think every time I read a piece that you've written, I'm in awe of you. I must say this, right? I mean, that is very incisive and very lucid language, which, without complicating with words or any of that, you have a way to reach straight to the heart of your readers, right? And those lessons and some of your books on the experiences that you went through as a sales leader and all of those things, those are, I would say that I would definitely recommend them to any of the younger management graduates who join any of these MNC organizations, especially as they step into sales roles and marketing roles and all of those things, right? They will definitely act as good textbooks because they are pearls of wisdom, right? Sublimed over, and it comes from a lot of experience, hardcore on the ground experience, and not by just sitting in the room and working on the computers alone, right? By walking the talk, by talking to several stakeholders, right? I have learned a lot, and I am extremely privileged to have honored to have a friend and a mentor and a colleague in you, like, right? So ex-colleague, if I may say that. Like, so thank you, Ayan. It was such a fantastic opportunity talking to you now.
Thank you, and you're very kind, Kaviraj. Now, one last question. There are a lot of audience comments and questions that are coming in. Last question before we open the floor to the audience. If you had to choose one invisible force, Kaviraj, that propels institutions forward, what would it be? Would it be belief, trust, imagination, or something else altogether?
I will actually think belief is very important, right? In my view, belief is clearly the most important thing. There are times, let's be honest, right? I mean, life is not a bed of roses that way. And in one's career, there are times when one goes through conflicting thoughts, conflicting situations, crisis at work, and all of those things, right? And one should have, so in fact, I was discussing this the other way also, right? One should have the moral and spiritual awakening to believe in the process, right? Right. I think that's the only thing that can help you navigate through several conundrums, especially if you are looking for a high profile career and a corporate job, when one has to wade through a lot of zones of discomfort and all of that, right? Trust the process, and that doesn't happen easily. Only if you have that moral and spiritual maturity to believe in the system, in the process. I think so that belief is most important. That is the thing that is really going to drive people forward.
Oh, well said, Kaviraj. And I would, before I go to the audience question, I'll just share one thing on this belief or faith that you mentioned. And I read it in some time back, and I loved that analogy. They differentiated between trust and faith. They said that trust is something which has to succeed an objective event. So the event happens, then you have trust on that. But faith is something that needs to precede an event. You have to have faith or belief first, then the event will come. And they said that hope is neither faith nor trust. Hope is just a pessimist which is disguised as an optimist. I really love that analogy. And
No,
thanks for
no, absolutely. In fact, the baby which is thrown into the air by the father, right? It's a faith that the father is going to
yeah, going to
definitely catch you,
catch you.
right?
Absolutely. So I loved it that you said believe, Kaviraj, and that's really a very expected answer from a leader, a value-driven leader like you. Thank you. So I'll go to the audience question straight away. So
Thank you.
Aisha is saying hi, and then Anjali is asking you, how can young people create meaningful impact even if they don't have a title or experience yet?
People at every level can create impact. They just need to just look around their sphere of activity and sphere of influence, right? And as you create impact, the good thing is it's a virtuous cycle, right? Your sphere of activity actually increases. So don't wait for that grandiose event or grandiose occasion for you to create impact, right? And people at every level start creating impact. Look for areas where you can actually contribute, and that will start attracting more and more, right? And that is exactly how you start doing it. So it's very, very possible. You don't have to be at the chairman or a CEO level to create impact. You can certainly create impact in your sphere of influence.
You don't need a title to lead. Very well said, Kaviraj.
Absolutely.
So Aisha is asking you, how do you balance your vast experience across sectors like IT, media, and education in your current role?
As I said, I think that has given me a perspective, and I also have managed to. I also did functionally also diverse roles, be it in B2B marketing or sales ops or any of the thing. That really helped me create empathy. I would actually think that that has been the significant learning for me. So I'm able to so today in my current role, when I talk to diverse leaders, be it people from Google or Amazon on one side, or like L&T and engineering companies on the other side, or like university professors or all of that, I think the key part of leadership is also one's ability to empathize and put yourself in the other person's shoes. And at least at some level, if one has been through some of these roles in the past in different industries, different functions, and all of that, it's easier to empathize. And this is, in fact, something that as an advice that I tell some of the junior people in the team also, always put yourself in the other person's shoes, like, right? And that will unravel a lot of things, right? The behavior, the actions, all of that becomes very evident. Things become easy for you to grasp. Things that you may think are complex are really not that complex. There is a clear motive why a person is doing a certain set of things. So speak to that, address that becomes much easier. So I think that is the learning that I've had by working in multiple domains and functions.
So basically, Aisha, your experience, someone's experience, our experience should expand us, it should not restrict us.
Absolutely, very well said.
So Aniket Rao is asking you, what are the key qualities that make a leader truly impactful in your opinion?
See, there are several qualities, right? I mean, and it also depends leadership at what level, right? So there is really no as I mean, I will definitely give out my answer, but this is a really a nuanced answer, right? I would think. So first, I would say your intellectual bandwidth, your ability to envision things, looks into the future is extremely important. If you are at like a really an industry building, an institution building kind of a leadership level, right? What the future holds for you, that presencing or whatever it is, what I mentioned, like, so that becomes very important. Second, you have to have an opinion, right? You have to take decisions, you have to take calls. You cannot be in like on one hand and on the other hand kind of a person, right? And yes, most of the leaders are opinionated. I mean, it is opinionated is slightly different from having an opinion. So I would actually say that it is important to have an opinion. Third part is your interpersonal skills. That obviously, like, I mean, I think throughout this discussion, we have been talking about the need to have excellent personal skills and interpersonal skills and ability to influence people, even when they are not directly reporting to you, or even when they are not in your immediate sphere of influence or any of that. So I think there are several others. One could even list down 20 traits which are important, but I would actually think ability to envision the future and strategize, be a visionary leader, have an opinion about things, ability to take decisions and move forward, ability to lead people, and interpersonal skills. These are some of the very key things that I would advocate.
Thank you, Kaviraj. Very well answered, I think. So I think, yeah, even there's no one size fits all, but I think these are some of the really key elements which will become common denominators as you proceed in your career. You will see these, you will keep seeing these again and again in all successful leaders. So Rahul Kumar is asking you, how important is it to have a clear career plan versus being open to exploring different paths?
Okay, so let's say this way, right? I mean, it will be naive to say that I will take things as it comes and then move forward, right? It is like in a way like your annual business plan or any of that also. When you're at your starting position, you have to have a plan in place, right? But you should also remain agile and flexible enough to make course corrections as you get further inputs into these things, right? Why is this required at all in the first place? Because of information asymmetry, right? Because you don't have perfect information on what the future holds for you. Like, you're not able to have a clear view of what your future will look like. But it will be, as I said, it will be naive on our side to say that, like, anyways, it's a very rapidly changing world. So let me not have any plans at all. Let me just walk in and, like, take things as a, no, it's not like that. It is important to have a plan. It is important to know your strengths at any point in time, what does the future looks like, and take some decisions based on that, but also leave a few levers for you to, so that, and those are things like in the current context, it's your ability to learn, unlearn, relearn, all of that, right? Learnability is something that becomes very important. And so keep those skill sets always honed, those skills honed, right? Like, I mean, your ability to unlearn, learn, those kind of things. So I think this is my advice. Like, so have a plan, but also have agility to kind of move, incorporate other new information into your system.
Let's start with a plan, and then, of course, be open to course correcting.
Right. I mean, when we have a sales target, for example, in the beginning of the year, we know where those, like, roughly we know that if it's like $1 billion, like, where those billions are going to come from, right? But truth be told, like, during the year, there are going to be like so many changes and all of that, right? Things will completely change perhaps, but that doesn't mean that you don't go without a plan.
Correct. Absolutely. Fine. Maybe, we are up on time, Kaviraj. I know it's been a while for you, and you're busy. We'll just take one last question from Siddhi Dubey. Siddhi is asking you, how has your experience with prestigious leadership programs shaped your approach to leadership?
I think for a young person, I mean, all these are well thought through programs, right? Be it organizations like Tata Group or the G or any of that, they are not fly by night organizations which just sprouted overnight, right? There are so many hours of intellectual prowess that have gone into conceptualizing, ideating, and actually implementing some of these programs. So there's a lot of thought that has gone, well thought through programs, all these organizations. So for a person who just graduates from the business school, right, it's very important to learn some of those systems, right? How some of those processes are put in place, right? By now, Ayon, you would also guess that, like, and while I'm totally open to looking at new things, I also believe in having some amount of process and thought process going into it, right? So I learned a lot about all these things, right? The values, the vision, envision, the vision, mission, value part, all of those things, right? And how do you actually work with different peoples? How do you actually, and they give you a lot of exposure, not just in an India platform, but in an international platform. On an international platform, they give you exposure to a lot of stakeholders. They give you exposure to how to manage the social impact of what you do, how to manage the internal employees, how to manage your clients, how to manage things in a cross-cultural way, cross-functional way, all of that. All these programs, be it TAS or be it ECLP or any of that. So that has really helped me grow as a person and as a professional.
Well, I can totally endorse this, Siddhi, because if somebody like Kaviraj, who has gone to two of the most premier educational institutions in the world, when he says that he has benefited, someone like me who has not gone to any tier one institution,
no, I think.
But I definitely benefited from GE's leadership program, where both of us were part of, and for me, it was, like he said, international exposure, getting your alum network that you build, the people that you brush shoulders with. They are some of the smartest men and women in the world. So, and they think, it removes a lot of blind spots, I think. We all come with our blind spots, and they give you a wide angle perspective. And it's like, practicing for a marathon, right? You every day you go and increase your mileage a little bit, and on race day, all that comes back to help you. And I think these programs are like that. It's like a training ground for real leadership roles when you take over. So very well said, Kaviraj. So it has been an incredible experience, Kaviraj, listening to you speak. You are definitely one of my favorite intellectuals in modern times, whom I love speaking to. And you have been so kind and so articulate with your answers. I'm sure everybody who is listening to this today and who will listen to the recorded version later is going to gain a lot. And this video is going to be a keeper, Kaviraj. So thank you so much for
Thank
this.
you so much. And I am extremely happy and grateful to you for making this happen. And it's always a pleasure speaking with you. And as I mentioned throughout this session, I have learned a lot from you and your perspectives. And thank you so much, and truly enjoyed the conversations.
Absolutely. And thanks from me to the Thinkly, me and Kaviraj to the Thinkly team, to Ganesh, who's our technical support, who is helping us with today's session, with Ria Ramesh, who is the Thinkly, partner who's created this session, Karishma, who's a co-founder and vice president at Thinkly, and all the wonderful people there. They are really doing a great job, Kaviraj, this platform. It's an ad-free, completely curated content from some of the leading thinkers of the contemporary contemporary world. And I hope your network also checks them out. And it's a great platform, and they're doing great work. So thank you, everyone, and thank you, Kaviraj, especially. Have a great rest of the day ahead. And
Thank
thanks
you.
again.
Thank you to
Bye-bye.
the Thinkly team as well, and thank you to you. And look forward to staying in touch. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye.